Okay, we can take questions, and I said Richard would have the first chance. Do you have the other microphone? Oh, is it this that they're using? Yeah, somebody show him how to put it on. I think you have to, let me see it. I think you have to open the inner, I'll do it. Let me see. Yeah, you turn it on the inside. There's a button to press here. That's the on-off switch. This is the mute and sound switch. No, then you have to get the actual microphone. Anyway, you have a strong voice.
Look, all right. If I re-ask my question, let me preface it this way. Okay. In the symposium, Plato has Socrates.
Okay.
Plato has Socrates pictured speaking about love. Everyone else at the symposium has already spoken. They've all given great praises to the gods and goddesses of love, except for Aristophanes, who's a much subtler guy and much more interesting. Anyway, when it's Socrates' turn, he says, "Oh no, that's not true. Love isn't this wonderful creature. Love, in fact, is very ugly. Is a dwarfish character, and is in constant pain because of all of the lack that he feels. That is, love is an absence of, of all this stuff." And so he then has the ladder of love that his Diotima told him about, right? And he describes, how to come to love the world and all of that. And the thing is, the assumption of the whole thing is that it's in positive terms. That is, he sees love as an absence. That's a lack, an emptiness. And when love gets gradually filled up by learning to love better and more things and so on, then, the world becomes its full self, sort of in the Upanishad sense. Okay? Now, the Buddha reverses this. He says, we're going to go after emptiness.
Yeah.
And, we want to get rid of all these layers of the plenum of fullness and all of that. And so once emptiness is the positive thing, in a sense, the desire not to have anything, which is, by the way, something they actually agree about. There's a fundamental agreement there between Plato, Socrates, and the Buddha, in that desire is seen as a form of suffering.
Yeah.
It's an absence. Okay, but then the Buddhist solution is to regard fullness and existence as a negative thing. And he seems you get rid of these layers of existence, and what you're left with is really parallel to what you're left with at the end of Socrates' speech, which is where you feel equanimity towards everything and magnanimity towards everything, except he's reversed the polarity. And what I'm asking is, why does the Buddha assume that when you lose desire, that is an attachment to things, that then you lose existence also? Why is the loss of desire for existence equivalent to the loss of existence?
Okay.
Because there's an odd mismatch between those two sets of concepts, right? I mean, they're viewed, the implications are entirely different. And somehow I'm wondering where does the assumption come from that if you lose the desire, you lose the thing?
Okay. I think I have to unpack your question or parse it in certain ways. First of all, the word that I'm rendering as existence is the Pali word bhava. And this word signifies, I call this a concrete state of existence in any of the different realms of existence recognized in the Buddhist cosmology. So bhava would be a concrete state of existence that will begin with conception or origination into that realm, and which terminates in death or passing away. Okay, so according to the Buddha, any particular individual existence is a bhava. So right now we have our bhava as human beings in the human realm. And what the Buddha teaches is that through time without beginning, we have been going through a continual repetition of existence. And this repetition of existence is what's called puna bhava. So puna means again. Existence, repeated existence. So we go through this cycle or this succession of existences through time without beginning, again and again taking birth, well, beginning actually with conception, coming through birth, growth, aging, and death. And so, in a sense, this is the problem that the Buddha faced when he went on his quest for enlightenment. And because this whole cycle of repeated existence involves again and again going through old age, illness, death, and then meeting with disagreeable experiences, sorrow, grief, displeasure, dejection, pain, and so forth, it all becomes qualified as dukkha, which doesn't mean, despite the common translation, simply as suffering, but it means what is unsatisfactory, deficient, inadequate, defective. And so then the Buddha inquires, this was sort of what he was looking for in his quest, what is the underlying cause of puna bhava? What is it that maintains this cycle of birth and death over and over? And then the Buddha comes to the conclusion that it's the craving for, especially the craving for existence, which then inquiring what sustains that craving, he takes it to be avijja, ignorance or unknowing, not knowing, not understanding, the true nature of things. Okay, so within the Buddha's scheme of liberation, the antidote to ignorance is vijja, or correct knowledge, correct understanding, insight, which is to be arrived at through cultivating panya, wisdom. And then when wisdom arises, then avijja is overcome. And with the overcoming of, because what one sees with wisdom is, at least one thing that one sees, is the unsatisfactory nature of puna bhava, of conditioned existence, repeated existence. And so when that realization becomes deep enough, then it eliminates the craving for continued existence. And so that puts an end to, because the craving for new existence has been eliminated, then there's no more, well, there is no more craving for new existence. And so when the craving for existence is eliminated, then the stream of consciousness at death no longer grasps after a new mode of existence. And then that brings to an end the cycle of repeated existence. Okay, but the insight that existence is dukkha, the elimination of craving, doesn't immediately bring the end of existence, in the sense that the one who's awakened or enlightened still continues to live out the normal lifespan. Did that get to the question?
Well, it doesn't persuade me. I have reasons for not being persuaded. But it still seems to me...
Wait, take the microphone, Stu.
It seems to me to be a paradoxical form of wish fulfillment. Saying, well, if you no longer crave existence, well, then you won't. You won't exist anymore. Which isn't that wish fulfillment? If you assume existence is dukkha, right? It's suffering. Then, okay, so you conclude, all right, you don't want to suffer anymore. You don't want to exist anymore. Well, you won't exist. Isn't that wish fulfillment? It's assuming that the wish and the thing are... that the wish is what affects the thing. That you, if you do not wish for existence, you won't exist. And there's no immediate proof of this, because you go on existing until you lead, have a normal lifespan and all that. And so the whole thing is kind of hypothetical. It's built on doctrine. It's saying, well, after your normal lifespan, you would normally be reborn. But there's no evidence of that really to be presented.
I mean, it's not sort of the task of the Buddha in the discourses to be trying to argue, in the sense of trying to argue to impose an acceptance of rebirth on people, apart from his authority as a teacher.
Right.
Okay, so within the discourses themselves, when one finds empirically based arguments for rebirth. First, let me deal with the issue of wish fulfillment. Let's take it from an internal perspective, an internal Buddhist perspective. One can't say that it's simply a matter of wish fulfillment, since it's not enough simply to wish to be free from the cycle of rebirth. I mean, somebody might be sitting and saying, I wish to be free from samsara, from the cycle of, or puna bhava, from the cycle of repeated existence. But just by wishing, one is not going to get there. In order to get there, one has to cultivate, the Noble Eightfold Path. And so that's a quite rigorous course of practice that one has to go through.
But it's just saying, okay, so there are shallow wishes and deep wishes, and this is a deep wish.
Well,
when you come to the end of your deep wish for existence, you then are freed from existence. But it's still the assumption that the dependence, that the thing, the existence of the thing or the phenomenon or state of mind is dependent upon the deep wish. Right? That is,
I wouldn't say that.
Desire for existence that gives you repeated existence.
What I say is that the Buddha's scheme of liberation is dependent upon, let's say, the premise or assumption that there is rebirth in some form, that consciousness continues beyond death and takes on new incarnations, new embodiments in different realms of existence within this. Maybe you don't even have to accept the cosmology in all of its details, but within a cosmos that allows for consciousness to continue in other forms. And then also the corollary of this premise is that the form of existence that one takes is determined by one's ethically significant actions, which are which is one's karma. Okay, so those are premises of the system, definitely, I would say, which I, as a Buddhist, I accept this on trust from the Buddha, since the Buddha says these are things that he's seen and realized for himself. The night of his enlightenment, he saw his own past lives, as well as with the divine eye, he saw how beings pass away and take rebirth in good and bad states, depending on their volitional actions. So these are things that, first, within the discourses themselves and even the commentaries, there's no arguments presented for rebirth. It's just laid out, this is what the Buddha teaches based on his own experiences, and then the whole tradition pretty much accepts this, since it's flowing from the Buddha, as being authoritative. It's not presented like, I would say, I wouldn't call it like a dogma in the sense that you have to believe this in order to be saved. If you don't believe this, you're going to be punished eternally in hell or anything like that. But these are like the foundational beliefs of Buddhism, or the Buddha's teaching. When we step out of the inner domain of the teaching, and then look at the premise of rebirth, then looking at it objectively, I don't think one could present any kind of rational argument that will establish rebirth as a necessary truth, even though some of the later Buddhist philosophers in India, the Naga, I think Dharmakirti, tried to develop a logical proof of rebirth, and now the Tibetans, particularly the Gelugpas who studied Dharmakirti, use Dharmakirti's arguments that it's necessary in order for consciousness to arise. It has to arise from a cause which is of the same nature as itself. And since the only thing which is of the same nature as consciousness is a prior moment of consciousness, therefore the first moment of consciousness at conception must have been preceded by a moment of consciousness before conception, that is, the consciousness from another life. Therefore, we prove that rebirth is true. But
it's like an ontological proof.
Yeah, I mean, it can be easy to undermine that argument in various ways. So, for myself, I just accept rebirth on the basis of the Buddha's teaching. But if one wants to look at it empirically, there are cases that I've mentioned previously, or researchers who have investigated reported cases of rebirth. And you could look at these for yourself and decide how rigorous the evidence is. The one who did the most research on this, I think starting from the 1950s, 60s, to a good part of the 1980s, was Professor Ian Stevenson, who is in the Faculty of Medicine at University of Virginia. He has, maybe his most general book is called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. Then he has a number of more specialized studies in this area. And then I think he has somebody at the University of Virginia now has continued his type of research. I don't remember the name.
Well, it's not so much the empirical evidence, it's the assumption that the desire is that you remove the desire, you remove the thing desired for, which strikes me as very similar to the objections to Heidegger's being in time, saying, well, he's caught in this
objections to what? I didn't catch it.
The objections to Heidegger's being in time.
Oh, to Heidegger's being in time.
Yeah, saying, he's saying, well, okay, he can make a way to metaphysics here, and what lots of readers are saying is, no, you can't, because you're assuming that the description of a state of mind is equivalent to the description of reality, right? And this is the same kind of thing. It's saying, well, the description of as you have the desire, then the existence is going to follow the desire.
Yeah.
That's a basically subjective premise.
Yeah, I mean that's the premise.
Right, and that's what strikes me as saying, Well, that's why it seems to me it's really primarily backed up by the authority of the Buddha.
Yeah.
And right, so it's an argument for most people. It's an argument from authority because the relevant personal experience is the Buddha's personal experience.
Okay.
It's not the personal experience of the rest of us because we are not qualified to have that experience. Let's assume his experience is far more valid than ours because he's a far better person than we are. And it's like, here, look, he was an accurate perceiver of other people who always said the right thing at the right time and persuaded, thousands of people and all of that. And a great man, and we're not.
Okay, let me just make one comment, and I think we have to give some other people a chance to ask questions. Even though the Buddha teaches rebirth on the basis of his own sort of experience, his own realization, from the Buddha's text we see it's not considered to be a realization which is unique to the Buddha himself, but those who follow his teaching and use the appropriate methods are able to recollect their own past lives and to see the process of birth, of death and rebirth operating in the case of others. Of course, you could raise the objection, and it's quite a valid one. Okay, these who are following in the Buddha's footsteps, these are not like objective scientists coming with white coats and, coming in from the blue, but these so-called confirmers are wearing ochre or saffron-colored robes, and they've taken refuge in the Buddha, and they're practicing his teaching.
Well, I can leave the scientists out of it. The reason I raised Plato in the first place is because he shared the belief in rebirth. Was extremely common at the time. You look in the index of a complete Plato, and you'll find like 20 references to reincarnation, rebirth, and so on. And so it's not that he was denying that belief. It was that he was assuming that desire was a negative thing. It was an absence. And so he didn't have the tendency to see desire as productive of an existing thing, which the Buddha had. It made the contrary assumption about the nature of desire. And that's what intrigues me.
Okay, I think I'll have to give some other people a chance to. What is your name? Mike, okay. Are you coming from New Jersey?
Yes.
Oh, okay, now I know.
Yes. And at the climate marches, I met you again. You gave me this book many, many years ago. I've observed in this sutta that throughout the Buddha talks about the perception of people, the perception of force, the perception of earth, until we get to the signless concentration of mind. At that point, he drops the word perception.
That's a good point.
And it's always stuck out for me when I read this, because if you define perception, it's being aware of something through the senses, or it's even just a bare awareness, textbook definition. But I also look at perception as having a bias behind it, having an opinion. Like my perception of Earth could be very different than what your perception of Earth would be. And I just always found it curious when I study this sutta, how that word perception disappears right at the end when he's talking about becoming an arhat. Except for leaving the 6 sense bases behind, which, as you had just stated, we're beings in a body. We're going to be this way until we move on to another form.
I think the reason is that in the case of the other experiences which are being discussed, what is being focused upon is, it's a perception because it's a perception of some object. And so it's, we're moving from perception of, people, perception of village, perception of earth, then perception of each of the 4 bases. So it's perception relating to an object. In this case, when we come to the signless concentration of mind, that is itself, it's a mental state rather than an object. And so it's not the perception of that mental state which is to be considered, for example, as impermanent, as conditioned, volitional volitionally produced and therefore impermanent and subject to cessation. But it's the attainment itself which is to be viewed from that perspective. Do you get the difference?
It seems like a pretty radical shift to
Yeah,
go from
there is
something external to all of a sudden now it's within
Yeah.
yourself and you're looking at yourself. And like
Yeah.
you said, you turn the awareness around.
Yeah.
But it always seemed very significant to me
Yeah.
in concentration meditation is to
Yeah.
see if, when something like that starts to occur.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's definitely intended here, in that there is an intentional shift away from focus upon the object of perception. And so what it's doing in the earlier stages is continually refining the perception, because one is taking continuous or successively subtler and more refined objects of perception. But in the last stage, or the last contemplation, one is turning from the object of perception to the mental state. To put it that way, to the subjective state, which is, and it's this timeless meditative concentration. So in a sense, because it's timeless, the object is probably attenuated to the point where it's nothing clearly visible in itself.
When I look at perception as being, say, I perceive something differently than you do,
Yeah.
would that be an accurate way to look at perception, the way the Buddha used it? Because it's used so many times. It's used in the 5 aggregates. It's used in many suttas. And I just see it as a recurring word that I've always wanted to clarify the definition for.
Yeah, there are actually, there are different ways in which the texts treat perception. Okay, the simplest way is in terms of the object, the perception of visible forms, perception of sounds, odors, tastes, touch sensations, mental objects. So that's simply differentiated according to the object. But there are also ways of classifying perception according to, maybe call it the subjective tone of the perception.
Right.
And so the Buddha speaks sometimes of wise perception or wholesome perception,
Right.
and then sometimes of unwholesome perception. So the unwholesome perception would be perception which is sort of tinged with desire, in the sense of craving, perception tinged with ill will, and perception tinged with harmfulness, with the intention of harming others. And then the 3 sort of contrasting perceptions are the perception of desirelessness or renunciation, perception of goodwill, perception of non-harming. So that's just one way in which perception is divided up. But then there are some suttas which speak about perception as being like a mirage, which compares, these would be the deluded perceptions. And then it uses in our experience, sometimes when driving along a road on a dry day when the sun is very strong, we see a pool of water, what seems to be a pool of water on the road, but when we come close to it, it disappears. So that would be like an illusory perception. The object is like a mirage. And so there are a number of suttas which speak about how distorted concepts arise on the foundation of perception.
Yeah, very good. Thank
But
you.
perception also has to be used. It's also said that perception, this would be like the wise perception, is the basis for developing mindfulness and insight. So perception can cut either way.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Osmond had his hand up in the back.
Yeah, it seems like the Buddha was following the 4 arupa jhanas, and then he went to like the 9th jhana, which is the cessation of perception and feeling. And maybe that's why he left out perception.
Yeah, that actually brings up an important point. It's good that you brought that up. That this state called the signless concentration of mind is not the same as the cessation of perception and feeling. in the cessation of perception and feeling, well, we come across this. What could lead one to confuse them is that both come after the attainment of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. But the cessation of perception and feeling is never called a samadhi. And it wouldn't be called ceto samadhi, a concentration of mind, because within that attainment, the perception and feeling are absent. But this is a meditative state in which awareness or consciousness is present. It's not, I have to say, it's not clarified within the suttas exactly what's meant by the signless concentration of mind. That's why I had to bring in what the commentary explains it as the concentration associated with insight into impermanence. But, it seems pretty clear to me that it's not the same as the cessation of perception and feeling, but it's a distinct meditative state. And the two get confused, I believe, in the Chinese translations, because the word that's translated as that nimitta is the Chinese character is xiang.
Xiang.
Yeah. Wait, something is missing here. I saw it in my mind's eye. Right, this. No, not. That's where the confusion comes in. That's where the confusion comes in. You see, this is pronounced. I've seen it both with the first tone and the fourth tone. Yeah, I've seen it in both ways. Xiang. Yeah. Okay. So this equals nimitta. And so unimitta is, do I dare try wu xiang? It's something like, you can use the simplified one. What is it, something like? Very close.
Very close.
Okay, wu xiang, that's unimitta. Then, for some reason, for the word sanya, which is completely different in Pali, it comes out in Chinese. Wu xiang. Yeah. Yeah, so the translators, where they should have used wu xiang, instead they used wu xiang, meaning non-perception. So where they should have had signless, they use wu xiang, non-perception, and in that way they mixed up the meditation, the concentration, the signless concentration with the non-perception concentration, or with the non-perception attainment. Okay, any further questions? What's, it's not necessarily evil, but there's room for mistakes and the confusion.
Bhante, I just had a much easier question for you to answer. The punabhava, the again existence, what is the difference between that and samsara? I always thought it was the same
They're
thing.
pretty much the same, except maybe samsara just suggests the length of it, going on and on and on, whereas punabhava just puts the emphasis on the repetition of it. But in effect, they are the two terms for the same thing. Okay. Okay.
I'll do a little bit translate that. Question number one is basically ask why Buddha go through from to formless state of meditation, because it's not required. Even with form third jhana, they can still reach liberation.
I think he's just trying to show the successive stages and the refinement of emptiness. So to be complete, he has to bring in the formless meditations.
And that's actually, this is another question is basically is asking what is the lowest jhana is required to achieve liberation.
That question isn't related to the sutta, so I'm not going to answer. Okay, well, if there's one more question, then I'll answer. Then we have to stop because there's another group coming in here.
But what is nimitta? Since there's wu xiang, then can you please explain?
What is the nimitta here?
Yeah. What is sign? Then signless, right? And what is the sign?
Yeah. Here the word nimitta is being used differently than it comes to be used within the work like Visuddhimagga and the commentaries, where nimitta is used to represent the inwardly visualized object of meditation. What is meant by nimitta here, it's never explained in the suttas themselves, but again, this is what the commentary says in this case, that it's the appearance of stability, solidity, or permanence in conditioned phenomena. And so when one is develops the perception of impermanence or the contemplation of impermanence deeply enough, then it removes that appearance of solidity or stability in phenomena. So nimitta would be, in that case, the appearance of stability, solidity, or lastingness in phenomena. Okay, we have to end for the day, so again, we'll end with 3 half bows to the Buddha. Okay, thank you all for coming.